Do you want to become a better iPhone app developer? You need to learn 36 keyboard shortcuts for Xcode navigation. Hey, I'm Paul Solt from Super Easy Apps, and I'm going to show you how to get started in Xcode quickly and efficiently. Let's get started. Looking at Xcode, there are 4 big areas of content around the screen that we're going to focus on. We've got the Navigator on the left, we've got the editor in the center, we've got the inspector on the right side, and we've got the debug area down below. We're going to focus on a bunch of different navigation keyboard shortcuts that are going to help you work with these different areas today. And then I'll have another video that digs more into editing shortcuts and debugging shortcuts so that you can be even more efficient when you're working in Xcode. So let's get started. All right. So I'm going to hide this and we'll continue. So we're talking about navigators. We're going to talk about panels, inspectors. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the windows of Xcode. We're going to jump into that editor. There's the editor jump bar that's super useful. And then we'll finish with some Windows management. And these aren't necessarily specific to Xcode, but I find that beginner developers don't always know these shortcuts. And it makes using a Mac so much more engaging and satisfying that anytime I switch to Windows, I just miss these keyboard shortcuts right from the get-go. Let's start with navigators. The navigator is that left panel on my screen. It's this area over here. And we've got a bunch of different keyboard shortcuts. You can see the panel thumbnails up here at the top. And this is going to allow us to interact with that. So up first, we have the file navigator. This is going to show you all of your files. And if you didn't see this, pressing this keyboard shortcut is going to hide and show that. So let's try that out. So if you do Command 1, when it's not visible, it's going to show. Now, next up, we've got the source control. Source control is the next tab over. You can just click on it, or you can do Command 2. So now you know 2 keyboard shortcuts, Command 1, Command 2. Now, source control has 2 different modes. So if you want to switch between both the sub heading changes or repositories, you just press the keyboard shortcut twice, and that'll cycle between the changes and the repositories. Up next, we have bookmarks. Bookmarks are a great way for you to add things that you want to fix. Now, this can either be from a search result, or this could be from bookmarks that you add directly to code. So I can find different bookmarks that I've added to code, or I can have a filter that's based on some text where I use TODOs, and I can sort of see, okay, where are the different TODOs in my application? So that's bookmarks. That's Command 3. Command 4 is one of the most important keyboard shortcuts. If you're going to remember any of these, it's the find window. Command 4 I use all the time. And I have another keyboard shortcut for finding that's also great. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so up next we have issues. Issues is Command 5. This is going to show you any issues in the application, and sometimes you'll see fix it, sometimes you won't, and you'll be able to address anything there. So that's Command 5. Command 6 is going to take you to the testing window. So if we hit that, we can see all of our tests. We can go ahead, we can run those tests directly from this panel. Command 7 is going to take us to the debug area. So when you're actually running the application, you're going to see all of these different panels and impact. And if you have a crash, you'll see your stack frame over here. So it's a super insightful thing where there's a lot of different information that we can get access to. Up next is our breakpoints. So Command 8, that's going to take us to any breakpoints that we have in our application. You can just sort of jump around to these different areas. You can get rid of them as well. If you drag something, it's going to delete it as well. Our next up is going to be the reports navigator. This is going to give you access to the console, all of the output, the launch history, and the build notes. This is super useful when you've got a really big project and you're trying to track down why did it fail to build. And that is our set of navigators. So there's a file navigator, source control navigator, bookmarks, find, issue, test, debug, breakpoint, report. All you have to remember is that these are Command 1 through 9. Super easy to remember. Up next, we have panels. So I talked about the different panels at the very beginning of this video. We've got the Navigator panel, we can actually hide and show that panel with Command 0. So if you remember commands 1 through 9, Command 0 is a natural extension of that to hide and show this panel. I use this all the time on a small screen when I need to get maximum screen real estate for my code. After that, we have the inspector panel. It's very similar, except that we're going to be using the Option key. So it's going to be Command Option 0, and that's going to hide and show that right panel. Very easy to remember because it's similar to the other show and hide for your Navigator panel. And last but not least, this one's a little bit harder to remember, but once you get into the debugging keyboard shortcuts, which I'll talk about in another video, it makes a lot more sense. So we've got Shift Command Y. You do that, and it's going to hide and show this debug area. You're going to see your variable view, and if you've got the console on, you'll also see any keyboard output. Okay, so those are the different panels. We've got the Navigator, the Inspector, and the Debug console. After that, let's get into Inspectors. So Inspectors is that right panel. So if you do Option Command 1, you're going to see that this goes to that for a particular file. Now, since I'm on the build file, let's actually go to one of our files, and we're going to see some more interesting information here. Okay, so Command Option 1 will take us to this first tab on the top left. Now, one thing to note that different files have different inspectors, so not every file has all of the inspectors. After the file inspector, we can go to the history inspector. This is going to be for like GitHub history. So that's going to be Option Command 2. That takes us to all of the Git commits so that we can see all those different ones from yourself, or if you're working on a team project, you can see your team commits. After that, we've got the quick help. So that's going to be Option Command 3. Going here, you're going to see related documentation. So if I select a symbol over here, like view, we're going to get documentation in this sidebar, and you don't have to do anything fancy to get it to appear. So if you always like to have documentation on screen, this is a great way to have that on screen with that right sidebar. After that, we have the accessibility. Now, this is the only one that's out of order, but this one doesn't exist for all types of content. So that's going to be Option Command 5, and that will take us here, and we really need to be on something that's accessible. So I think the canvas is going to show us some type of content. And then the last one that we have is the attributes inspector. Now, this is the most important one, in my opinion, of this one when you're actually doing work, especially UI kit work. This is going to be Command Option 4. So you'll notice that it's the fifth icon. The accessibility icon, for some reason, is in the fourth spot, but attributes is in the fifth spot. So that's the only one that's out of order. So these are all really easy to remember. They're very similar to the Navigator shortcuts. The only thing that's different here is we're using the Option key to access these. Up next, let's talk about Windows. Windows in Xcode, I'm going to talk about the main ones that you need to be aware of. The documentation window is going to be Shift Command 0. So we do this, we can pull open the documentation and you can search for something. So here I was searching for NS Gesture, trying to understand how it would work. I kind of ran into a bug where this just didn't work. And I think it's an actual bug with SwiftUI and NS Gesture. So we'll see. Maybe I'll submit a bug. Maybe I won't. I don't really have a whole lot of time. All right. So that is the documentation window. We can go to the next one. Welcome to Xcode. This is what you're going to see when you first open Xcode. Sometimes this is useful to get that quick link to that project that you want to open. I generally don't use this window a whole lot unless I'm just opening Xcode for the very first time, but it does give you some quick links. Okay, so next up, we have devices and simulators. Now, I can't demo this one because I have my ScreenFlow recording software use this same keyboard shortcut. So I actually stopped my presentation because I totally forgot that that was the case. This is going to be Shift Command 2. So if you do that, this will take you to devices and simulators. You can also get to that up top if we go to Window, Devices, and Simulators. So we do that. It's going to show us our different devices. You can see your iPhone, your Apple Watch, your iPad, and you can see different simulators that you have installed on the system. This is super helpful when you don't want a certain device to always appear. So since I'm not doing watchOS development, I just set never to my Apple Watch so that it never shows up. After that, we've got the organizer. This one's a little bit harder to remember because it feels a little bit more of a stretch. So this is going to be Option Shift Command 0. And that should open up, sorry, not 0, O. That should open up Organizer. And here we can see your crash log for your different apps that you have submitted. We can see information about the archives. This is anything that you've submitted to the App Store. So recently I updated my photo table app so that it was actually built for iOS 17. Here is the latest version that I submitted. I added some notes here. So that's the organizer. All right. So those are the windows of Xcode. These are super helpful. The most common ones that you're going to use are going to be the devices and simulators when you're trying to connect to a device and it's not playing nicely. I think Xcode 16 actually works better with devices, but it's a little hard to see. I know there's a new thing in Xcode 16 that I'll talk about in another video when I go over the Xcode 16 release notes that makes it so much less frustrating. All right. So those are windows. Now I want to talk about the editor. So let's jump back over to Xcode and let's look at the editor. Now, these keyboard shortcuts are really important. I use them a lot, just like the other ones, but these ones you're going to use as you're working in different files all the time. So to show the editor only, you're going to do Command Enter, and that's going to get rid of any canvas or assistant editor, and it's just going to show this code editor. After that, we've got the canvas. So if we're in a Swift UI view, and I do Option Command Enter, we now can hide and show our canvas. So hiding and showing will hide and show. Now, this doesn't always execute it. If you've recently run the application, it may not actually execute it. All right, so I'm going to throw in one extra keyboard shortcut. I wasn't going to do that in this video, but it makes sense here. We're talking about the canvas. Sometimes it doesn't always refresh. So if you just show the canvas, you can do Command Option P, and that will cause it to refresh its display. Or you can click the little button that appears here. All right, so that's canvas. After that, we have the assistant. So if we do Control, Option, Command, Enter, so I'm using my pinky, my index finger, and my thumb, and pressing Enter, this is going to open up the counterparts or the assistant editor, and we'll see different things. So it'll default to counterparts, which can show us the interfaces, but you can also get to superclasses, subclasses, siblings, user interfaces. This was super helpful with Objective-C for seeing a header file, or if you're doing C++, for seeing the .h and the other files. So very helpful. That's the assistant editor. You can turn it on, turn it off, and see there's different Swift interfaces. If you're working in Objective-C, like I was at GoPro, super useful to get the Swift interface. Okay, so after that, let's talk about focus. So let's say you want to focus on one file, and I'm going to close out this, but I want to open up a second file. So I'll hit this button up top to open up a side-by-side. Now I'm in my slide deck file over on the right side, and I'm in my presentation view on the left side. If I just wanted to focus on my slide deck view, what I can do is the focus keyboard shortcut. So this is going to be Control, Shift, Command, Enter. So again, I'm using my pinky, index finger on Shift, thumb on Command, and pressing Enter. So it's a bit of like a claw motion, but this is super useful. So that is for focus mode. And that will focus on this file that is selected, and it will unfocus when we press it again. If we click here, we can do Control, Shift, Command, Enter, and we can focus just on this file. All right, so that is focus. So we learned how to show the editor only. This happens when you've got the canvas open and you just want to focus on just the editor itself, how to show and hide the canvas, how to do the assistant, and then how to focus on a single file if you've got a multi sort of editor environment set up so that you can quickly drill into just one file and then drill back out. Okay. After that, we've got the editor jump bar. So the editor jump bar is going to allow us to do different actions at the very top of the file. So let's take a look at these different ones. The first one we have is going to be the control 1. And this is going to be very similar to the command 1 in that it's sort of a similar logical flow. So when we're in the editor, we want to use the control key to access these different jump bar items. So this allows us to get access to recent items, locally modified files, counterparts, superclass, siblings, generated interface files, and documentation preview. Okay, and we get this per file. So you'll see these different jump bars on each of these different files. So depending on which editor we're focused on. All right, so that's related items. The next one is going to be previous history. That's going to be this arrow key here. This is going to show us all of the previous files that we've accessed. After that, we have next history, which is control 3. That'll open up the menu for the next history. I actually have to be going back in order to get access to this. There's no next history here. So let's just back up 2 files. And then let's do the control 3. And we'll see that it will take us to that menu. And we have those 2 options to go through. So I can jump back to presenter view. After we do that, let's look at top level items. This is a handy shortcut if you want to get access to the Xcode project file settings quickly. So this is control 4. And if you just press enter here, it's going to open up the project settings. So that's a super easy way without using the mouse to get access to your project settings. And then you can sort of jump around these different settings. If we do that, if we go backwards, I'll just hit the arrow key up here. And we do that shortcut one more time, Command 4. You can also use the arrow keys to then sort of navigate the same hierarchy that you see on the left, where you can sort of just jump into one of these files and we can open up the slideshow parser tests to see how that is working. After that, we've got group files. So group files is going to be control 5. And if we do that, we're going to see a smaller dropdown. Now you'll see that we're sort of in the folder structure of my unit tests. So that is this structure over here. And this is just one level deeper based on whatever file we have selected here. If I was in this one and we did the same keyboard shortcut Command 5, you would see all of the related files at this level. So that's the group files. That's everything that's in the same group. After that, we have document items. So if we do control 6, this will show us everything in the current file. Now, this is super handy when you're looking for through a really big file for a to-do, or you're looking for a function name. And so the other nice thing about this one is you can filter it. So you can just start typing show banner, and you can get some autocomplete. You don't even have to type real words. You can just start typing show B. Am I lying? Yeah, it will match, but you have to match some of the word. So it can't just be a complete no match, because SB doesn't match anything. So it looks like you have to type some of it, but that can help you get access to whatever method you're looking for, and then you can jump right to that line of code. All right, so that is the editor jump bar. This is available with any editor that you're in. This is a quick way to sort of navigate the different things. Probably the most useful is going to be that control 6, and then the control 4 if you want quick access to the project settings. The other ones, I use other keyboard shortcuts that I'll talk about for backwards and forward navigation. And so I really don't use those first 3 at all. Okay. And last but not least, these aren't particularly specific to Xcode, but when you're working on code and you've got multiple windows open, I find that it is super helpful to understand some of the basics of window management on macOS. The first one is settings. So you can get access to settings anywhere. This is where you can customize other keyboard shortcuts. This is where you can get access to just different settings and text editing, turning on and off different features. So this was previously called Preferences. Apple renamed it, so now it's called Settings. All right, close window. This one's super useful. So if you've got any window open or any editor open, you can just do the Command W and it will close it. So if I click here and we do Command W, it will close that editor, but this panel is still open with an empty editor state. If I do it one more time, we can close that entire panel within the editor. So you can have multiple editor panels side by side or top down, depending on how you've added them. So I can also add panels in a vertical orientation and I can close them in the same way by doing Command W. Command W will close out that window. You also have a X in the left corner. Clicking that will also close it in one action. Okay, next up is cycling windows. This one's really important when you've got multiple Xcode projects. If you've got some sample code or a test project and then the main app, this is super useful to go between those different ones. This is going to be Command tilde. So just do this. You can get access to that that intro to Xcode one. We've got the organizer, we've got the documentation, and if you had multiple Xcode projects, you could cycle through all of that really quickly with the Command tilde. Or at least I recognize it as Command tilde. It looks like it is actually typing Backtick. So cool, good to know. All right, after that, we've got full screen. Not every app uses this the same. Some are Command F, some aren't. Xcode is not, so you have to be a little bit more intentional. It's going to be Control Command F in order to activate full screen. So that will go into full screen mode. I don't find this mode as effective for Xcode unless I just need to focus on code and I want no other distractions. Because if I need to work with an iOS simulator, having it sort of here, you can do like the multi-window stuff, but it just doesn't work as well. So I like to just lay out my windows and not necessarily use full screen unless I really need to focus or I'm on a small screen like my laptop without my external monitors. Then maybe I'll go into full screen just so I can focus on that chunk of code and then exit it when I need to do some testing with the simulator. And then the last one is Command T, and this is going to be for a new tab. So Command T will open up a new tab. It will basically duplicate all of the files that you've had open and create this tab along the top. The only reason I ever use this is if I want to do multiple searches. So if I do a Command Shift F, which is going to open up that file navigator, which is Command 4, and I can search for something like the presentation view model, and I can see where all the instances are. But if I'm refactoring something and I want to find something else, I will open up a new tab. So I'll do Command T, open up a new tab, and then I'll do Command Shift F to search, and I'll search for something different. So let's find all the places where I use Show Banner, press Enter. Now I haven't trashed my previous search history because maybe I need to go back to some of these. And now I have quick access with this other tab to see those different ones. So when I'm done, I like to close this out because it steals a little bit of vertical space, and I don't really use tabs in Xcode beyond anything except a secondary search. All right, so I just close them. There is a keyboard shortcut for that, but I'm not going to teach you another keyboard shortcut. All right, so that is Windows management. Getting access to settings is super simple. Closing windows, closing editor panels is really helpful. Cycling windows, very useful when you've got multiple Xcode projects or different Xcode windows open. And then new tabs when you need a secondary search. I find that super useful. Beyond that, I don't really like the feature. All right, so thanks for listening and learning a little bit about navigators, the different panels, and how to hide and show those panels. So we can hide and show those panels. These different keyboard shortcuts are really going to help you move around Xcode, find those files, and show the content, hide the content, get to where you need to go in a few keystrokes. If you start practicing these, if you watch this video again, you're going to learn them more. I'm going to have a link down below where you can download a PDF with all of these keyboard shortcuts so that you could print it out, hang it up on your wall. So if you want that, check out the link below. If this was helpful, hit the like button and subscribe. And then in my next video, we're going to talk all about editing keyboard shortcuts. So I've got a lot more, and learning these is going to make you a better iPhone app developer. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.